Ryu was a regular teenager who got hit by a truck and was reincarnated into a world full of magic. He got the ability to use water magic and only wanted to live a peaceful life by himself, but he soon becomes the strongest mage in the entire world without even realizing it. Ryu, a 15-year-old boy, suddenly finds himself in a strange white place, and as he wonders what is going on, a tall blonde guy arrives there, telling him that he is dead. Ryu suddenly remembers getting jumped by Truck Kun and asks the blonde dude if he is God. He replies that he is more like an angel who is here to send him to another world. Ryu can't believe that he gets to be Ice Guide, and the angel tells him that he can live as he wants in his next life. Well, Ryu is a chill guy and he just wants to live a slow and peaceful life. The angel has no problem with his choice, and he tells Ryu that the world he will be sent to has magic, and around 20% humans can cast spells. Ryu has talent for water magic, and the angel tells him that he will be dropped at a safe house in the middle of a forest because he opted to live a slow life. There will be enough food to last him for 2 months, and there will be an invisible barrier that will prevent monsters from approaching him. Soon, Ryu wakes up in the house in the middle of the forest, and he immediately heads outside to test out his newfound magic abilities. He then checks out his house that has some frozen meat in a cold room and also an empty bath. There is a knife and 2 beginner-level books on the table that tell him about the monsters and the plants in the area. After that, he heads outside again and experiments with magic, discovering that he can create water just by imagining it, and there is no need to chant any spells. He wants to take a hot bath, but can only create room temperature water, so he decides to start a fire instead. He goes full caveman mode and tries creating fire by rubbing sticks together, but he doesn't have the required skill or strength for that. He gives up, but then he gets an idea to use the sunlight to create fire instead. For that, he decides to create a lens using ice, imagining individual water molecules bonding together as heat is stolen from them, and ultimately succeeds in freezing the water. He then carves the ice into a sphere and uses it as a lens to start a fire. Thanks to that, he can enjoy a hot bath at night, and he realizes that he can create hot water directly if he just applies the principles of modern science to magic. The next day, as he has some dried meat for breakfast, Ryu thinks that he must increase his offensive power because he will need to hunt monsters once he runs out of stored food. He starts by practicing to shoot a water ball at a tree, and even though he can hit his target in the first attempt, it doesn't do any damage. He is not discouraged by that and decides to shoot out a high-pressure water jet because that will have enough power. However, he can't put enough force in the water jet to reach the tree, and it just seems like he is peeing from his hand. Ryu feels like giving up, but then he remembers that the angel told him that the key to using magic is his imagination, and he can get better at it only with regular practice. So Ryu keeps practicing shooting a water jet till he can consistently hit the tree, and at night, he is able to generate hot water directly. The next day, he tries creating ice crystals out of thin air because he has always dreamt of using the Icicle Lance magic spell. However, shooting an icicle is even harder than shooting water, but Ryu keeps practicing it along with his other water magic variations. Days pass, and he becomes more skilled at using water and ice, and one day, he decides to head into the forest to hunt for some food. He explores the beautiful forest and decides to gather some herbs and call it a day. But just then, he notices an angry boar staring at him. Ryu freezes in terror as the boar charges at him, and he barely gets out of its way at the last moment. The boar simply knocks down a tree and Ryu gathers the courage to fight back. He covers the ground in front of the boar with a sheet of ice, making it slip. As the boar slides towards him really fast, Ryu creates multiple sharp icicles pointing towards it at the end of the runway. The boar hits the icicles at full speed and immediately dies after being turned into Swiss cheese. Ryu can't believe that he won, and at night, he checks his book on monsters to find that boars are the weakest kind of monsters. He then notices that even though the book talks about beginner-level monsters, there are 2 special entries at the end. The first one is about dragons, who are powerful enough to burn down entire cities easily, and if one spots them, he should immediately run away. The second page is about demons, who are beings of unknown origin, and the book just tells everyone to pray that they never run into a demon because that means instant game over. Ryu realizes that the world is too big and he needs to get stronger fast. So the next day, he ditches his clothes to go full Tarzan mode and ventures into the forest again. This time, an assassin hawk attacks him and he barely dodges its first attack. The huge bird then sends invisible wind slashes towards him, and Ryu realizes that this monster is way out of his league. He runs away, creating ice blocks behind his back to block the wind slashes, and then shoots water jets at the bird. The assassin hawk dodges everything and then charges towards Ryu at full speed, but he creates an ice wall at the last moment, blocking its attack. The bird loses one of its eyes because of the collision, and it decides to retreat this time, much to Ryu's relief. However, while he was running away from the hawk, Ryu lost his sense of direction. As he tries reaching his house, he suddenly finds a glowing lake with a headless knight standing on the water's surface along with a headless horse. Ryu is stunned to see this, and then the headless knight turns its attention towards him. Luckily, he returns home in one piece and continues exploring the forest after that, fighting stronger monsters and mastering his attack magic. At night, he goes to the lake again, where the headless knight is waiting for him. Ryu could not find anything about headless riders or Dullahans in the book, and he wonders if it is because they are high-level monsters or if they are not considered monsters at all. However, none of that matters because he is here to spar against it. Ryu attacks the headless knight with a sword made of ice, but he can't manage to land a single strike. He keeps taking hits instead, but blocks them all with an ice shield. He eventually gets exhausted and falls on the ground, but the headless knight doesn't attack him because it is actually training him. As he gets up, the headless knight comes towards him, holding a small crystal knife. The knight coats the knife in water and then freezes it, turning it into a sword of ice. It gives the sword to Ryu, who realizes that the headless knight is asking him to master this technique. Soon after that, Ryu runs into the assassin hawk he fought earlier, but this time, it has evolved into a stronger version of itself, but also lost all its rights. The evolved hawk sends wind slashes at Ryu, who creates ice walls to block them instantly. He barely manages to avoid getting hit by the attacks that tear through his shields because they are much stronger than the last time. Ryu is forced to run away, and he can only block the hawk's attacks. The hawk suddenly speeds towards him, and Ryu somehow stops its attack by piling multiple ice shields in front of him. He tries to hit the hawk with icicles, but that doesn't work out either, and then the hawk uses a sonic attack to immediately cancel his ice shields. Ryu realizes that he is in trouble now, but then the hawk shocks him both figuratively and literally by attacking him with a thunderbolt. The monster swoops towards him to finish things, but Ryu manages to pull out his crystal sword and parry its attack. He can even slash away the invisible wind attacks sent by the bird, and when it swoops towards him again, he manages to stab it through the chest. The hawk falls to the ground and Ryu walks towards it, realizing that he just met the monster twice, but they developed a really strong bond. He thanks the hawk for motivating him to grow stronger and then pulls out the sword to let it bleed to death peacefully. Ryu then begins to head home, but then to his surprise, a dragon comes there. He figures that it is going to be his last day in this world, but surprisingly, the dragon starts talking to him through telepathy. The dragon asks him if he saw a black hawk and Ryu panics, thinking that he might have killed the dragon's minion. Luckily, the dragon seems pretty chill about it and even compliments Ryu on his achievement. He then points that the weapon he is carrying is quite rare, because it is the sword of the Fairy King. Ryu can't believe that, and he decides to learn more about the world from the friendly dragon who introduces himself as Lewin. They talk all day, but in the evening, the dragon gets called home, and he tells Ryu that they might meet again someday. On the other hand, the angels. A few weeks later, Ryu starts craving seafood, so he visits the beach, but he is shocked to find a shipwreck there. He quickly finds a man near the ship, and on checking him closely, Ryu finds that he is not alive anymore. Suddenly, he hears a man groaning and his eyes brighten, because this is the first human he has met since coming to this world. The man named Abel has flashbacks of a giant octopus monster attacking his ship during a storm, which caused him to fall into the ocean. But when he opens his eyes, he finds himself in Ryu's house. He realizes that he made it out safely somehow, and immediately starts searching for others. As he leaves the house, he becomes even more confused because he has no idea where this place is. And just then, Ryu approaches him from behind. Abel is shocked because despite being a fairly skilled warrior, he could not sense Ryu coming. He is also shocked by his dressing sense, but decides to be polite and not talk about it at first. Abel introduces himself to Ryu and thanks him for saving his life. Ryu replies that he could only save him, and everyone else was already dead when he found them. Abel tells him not to worry about those guys because they were smugglers, but before he can elaborate, his stomach starts growling. Ryu tells him that they can talk over a meal and leads him inside, where Abel the nosy quickly brings up the topic of his clothes. Ryo tells him that he has no other clothes and no fabric to create new ones, and Abel tells him to just buy some. He immediately stops, thinking that Ryo must be too poor to afford buying clothes. But Ryo lessens his guilt by telling him that there are no people who live in this area besides him. Abel then asks Ryo if he hunts for food, and he affirms. Next, he asks if he uses the knife for that, but Ryo shows off his water magic, saying that he does most of his hunting using magic. Abel is impressed because only half the people in the world can use magic, and he is among the other half that can't. That is surprising news to Ryo because the angel told him that only 20% of people can use magic. Anyway, Abel asks him to take him to the shore because he needs to confirm something. On the way, he tells Ryo to let him take the front lines if they run into any sort of danger. Ryo replies that it is not necessary, but Abel insists because he doesn't want to be the one being saved all the time. Ryo lets him do as he pleases, and they soon reach the broken ship where all the bodies have vanished. Abel thinks that either the monsters or the sea took them, and he thanks Ryo for rescuing him because otherwise he would have faced the same situation. Abel then says that he couldn't find what he was looking for, and for now, he wants to meet up with his friends. But the storm sent the ship far south, and he has no idea which direction should he follow now. He suddenly gets an idea and asks Ryo if he would like to come with him. Ryo is shocked to hear this, and Abel says that he could use his help to find his way back, and then he could find him a job that will allow him to live in better conditions. Ryo thinks about his offer for a while, and in the end, he decides to become Abel's guide back to the city. That evening, he looks at his garden that he has cultivated with a lot of effort, and he gets a bit sad thinking about leaving it all behind. At night, he tells Abel that he is going out to say goodbye to someone, and even though the knight is curious about the person, he decides not to pry into the matter. Meanwhile, Ryo heads to the lake to see the headless knight, and inform him that he will be leaving the forest for a long time. He thanks the knight for teaching him how to fight and then takes out his knife, saying that he will fight extra hard tonight. The headless knight also draws his sword, and then Ryo charges towards him, pushing him back with his relentless strikes. After a long and hard fight, Ryo gets exhausted and the knight returns to the lake. Ryo thanks him one more time, and the knight remains silent. However, as soon as he reaches his position, he turns around and summons a magic suit from inside the water as a farewell gift. Ryo gets sentimental on receiving the suit, and he once again thanks the headless knight before returning home. The next morning, Ryo and Abel get ready to depart on their journey, and Ryo starts feeling nostalgic about leaving the place he has spent so much time in. Soon, they run into a wild boar in the forest, and Abel asks him to let him handle it. He dashes towards the boar with his sword drawn, and then uses a combat skill to turn the poor animal into a donut. Ryo is amazed and asks what are combat skills, and Abel explains that people who fight with weapons use combat skills. They camp in a hollow tree at night, and the next day, they resume their journey through the forest. They come across some lizardmen in a swamp, and Abel decides to change the route instead of crossing paths with them because they are quite strong. However, Ryo can sense that the lizardmen are following them even after they change their path, and Abel gets ready to fight them. Ryo tells him that there are too many of them, and he will use his magic to fight too. Abel thinks that Ryo won't be able to fight without his staff, but he is shocked when Ryo blitzes 4 lizardmen with his icicle lances. After the fight ends, Abel asks Ryo about the spell he just used. He replies that it is just the regular icicle lance, but Abel tells him that his wind mage friends can only cast 1 attack at a time when they use magic, but he summoned 4 icicle lances at once. Ryo tells him that it must be a problem of the wind magic because this is pretty normal for water magic. Abel decides not to think about it that much and says they should continue their journey, but before that Ryo creates 2 glasses using ice and summons water in them. Abel notices that he used a different incantation this time, and Ryo covers it up by saying that he must have heard it wrong the last time. After that, Abel gives Ryo a coin, and he excitedly says that this is the first time he is seeing money. Abel is dumbfounded because he always thought that Ryo was poor, but he never imagined him to be this poor. He then starts telling Ryo that there are 3 major countries in the Central Plains that include the Kingdom of Nightly, the Debuhi Empire, and the Handelu Federation. Ryo starts throwing shade on the Debuhi Empire because he doesn't like the name, and while he keeps talking about the stupid name, they reach a vast clearing. Suddenly, they notice a rock near them move on its own, and Abel quickly slashes it in half. Ryo also puts up a water shield to block the stones speeding towards them, and Abel realizes that they just walked into a nest of rock golems. Ryo asks if golems are not more humanoid in shape, but Abel decides to deal with them before answering the question. He dashes towards the nearest golem and blows a hole through it, but the golem quickly patches the wound and starts attacking him. Abel retreats, saying that their attacks won't be effective on the golems, but then Ryo gets an idea. He creates a huge ice cube in the air and drops it on top of the golems, squishing them. Abel is aghast because he has never seen a spell like that before, but Ryo uses it a few more times to defeat the rest of the golems. After that, they find a special rock golem with a big magic stone, and Abel says that it will sell for a lot. Ryo says that he would like to get the magic stone out of other golems as well, but they are buried under ice, and he is either too lazy or too dumb to just melt all of it. They continue their journey with that and soon come across a gigantic croc-hippo hybrid. Abel says that it is a behemoth, which is a very rare and powerful monster he has never seen before. Ryo asks if they should hunt it, but Abel tells him that it is not even possible. Just then, some wyverns also come there and Ryo gets excited because now they will see a battle between monsters. Soon, the wyverns begin shooting rocks at the behemoth with magic, but it just roars, cancelling out their magic and causing them to fall to the ground. Ryo tells Abel that the giant monster probably used magic cancellation skill. Later, as they are having dinner, Abel asks Ryo more about the magic cancellation skill because he has only heard about certain traps in dungeons that can do that. Ryo gets excited on hearing about dungeons, and Abel tells him that there is a dungeon in the city of Loon where they are headed. Ryo gets mad that he didn't tell him about this important thing earlier, and asks him if he is hiding something else too. Abel asks him if he at least knows about dwarves and elves, but Ryo asks him to give him the details. A few days later, they reach a mountain range and Ryo says that they will find some human settlement after crossing the mountains. Abel asks him how can he be so sure, and Ryo wonders if he should tell him that he met a dragon who told him a lot about this world. He decides to keep it a secret in the end, saying that it is knowledge beyond human comprehension. Soon after that, they hear a strange sound and both of them get ready to fight. However, when a powerful monster called Griffin approaches them from the sky, both Ryo and Abel freak out. Abel starts having a panic attack, but Ryo quickly solves the situation by throwing a chunk of meat up in the air. Abel apes his act, and the griffin collects both pieces in its mouth before flying away. The boys heave a sigh of relief after it is gone, and they agree that they wouldn't have lasted long if they picked a fight with something so strong. As they continue their journey, Abel says that no human has encountered behemoths or griffins in the past 100 years, and the tall mountains must be stopping them from reaching human settlements. That reminds Ryo that the wyverns who fought the behemoth came from the north, which means their nest is nearby. He turns out to be right as they soon find some wyverns feeding on a monster. Ryo wants to fight, but Abel says it takes at least 20 experienced adventurers to face off against monsters as strong as wyverns. Ryo tells him that they won't be able to avoid fighting in the future, and asks if it will be better if the wyverns are pinned to the ground. Abel affirms, saying that he can beat one in close combat, and Ryo immediately steps out, chanting a long, fake spell just to summon 4 icicles to stab the wings of the wyverns. Abel uses this chance to blow their brains out, but then 2 more wyverns arrive there. Ryo pins them down using icicles, but without chanting a spell this time, and Abel gets suspicious. Anyway, they defeat the wyverns and collect their magic stones, and then continue their journey to the north. Soon, they cross the mountain range and arrive at the Green Hills. Abel is surprised that they not only fought wyverns, but managed to get a lot of magic stones that will fetch a lot of money once they reach the Empire. Ryo suddenly gets curious about which country they are heading to, because he is fine with anyone except the Debuhi Empire. Abel tells him that the Debuhi Empire is a bit farther to the north, and Ryo appears relieved on hearing that. This confuses Abel, and he asks Ryo if he has got any issue with the Empire. He replies that he has no issue with the Empire or its people, but the name is so cringe that he doesn't want to associate with it, and Abel finds that quite odd. Suddenly, Ryo spots a road in the distance, and on seeing that it runs from east to west, Abel realizes that the mountain range they just crossed was not ordinary. However, when Ryo asks him what he is thinking about, he replies that it is nothing and says that the road will lead them to a town. Ryo gets excited at the thought of sleeping in a bed, and Abel recommends him to try out the food in the town. They reach the town by night, and as they are eating dinner in an inn, Abel suggests Ryo to get himself registered with the Adventurers Guild, because a guild license will work as his identity card. Also, if he has a guild license, he won't have to pay any tax when entering a new city. He reminds Ryo that he just paid a silver coin to cover for him when they entered the town, and Ryo begins taunting him, asking if he is going to keep the record of every penny he spends for a friend's sake. Abel is low-key cringed out at this behavior, but he continues his lecture and tells Ryo that if he becomes a member of the Adventurer Guild, the guild will buy magic stones and monster material from him at a good price. He explains that only alchemists can use those materials properly, and Ryo gets curious to learn more about them. However, he doesn't get the chance to ask any questions as the waitress brings his food, and he can't believe his eyes when he sees a plate of curry rice. Ryo tries to process how curry rice can exist in this world because even in the Isekai anime, the protagonist has to work hard and travel all over the world to create the perfect curry, and he was kind of looking forward to that. The taste of the curry is also as delicious and nostalgic as the one he used to eat in Japan, and Ryo quickly finishes the plate before ordering more. The next day, Ryo keeps rambling about how good the curry was, and says that it turned out to be another interesting thing that Abel kept hidden from him. He playfully tells him to reveal all the secrets he is hiding, and Abel is taken aback by that. But Ryo just wanted him to tell him about the dessert shops in the town. Abel nervously walks away, saying that he doesn't like sweets, and Ryo is confused because of his sus behavior. Anyway, they resume their journey, and soon, they reach the town of Loon that is surrounded by vast wheat fields. As they reach the town gate, the guard Nimmer identifies Abel, and he is shocked to see him because he was reported missing a few months earlier. Abel tells him that a lot of things happened, and he managed to make it back home thanks to Ryo. Nimmer thanks Ryo for saving his friend and then eagerly shakes his hands, after which he starts catching up with Abel. Once they are inside the town, Abel tells Ryo that they should head straight to the guild, because with him there, Ryo can rank up immediately at the time of registration. He explains that usually, newbie adventurers are assigned F rank when they register, but if an adventurer ranked B or above can put a good word for them, they can rise up to D rank immediately. They soon reach the guild, and everyone there is pleasantly surprised to see Abel again. They surround him like he is some kind of celebrity, and Ryo is happy that Abel has so many people who care about him. He decides to let him enjoy this reunion for a bit more and steps outside to get some fresh air. He starts taking a walk when suddenly, he runs into an elf. While Ryo is captivated by her pointy ears and pretty face, the elf girl can't take her eyes off of him as well because of his outfit. She recognizes that it is the Fairy King's coat, and says that he must like Ryo a lot to give him such a gift. Ryo can't even understand what she means, and then the elf girl tells him that she is in a hurry today, but she hopes to meet him again someday. Ryo just stands there bamboozled when Abel comes outside to find him and tells him to come back in. He then introduces Ryo to all his friends as the guy who saved his life. Everyone thanks Ryo for saving Abel, and he starts liking all the attention he is getting. After that, Abel takes Ryo to the front desk and asks the receptionist to register him as a D-rank adventurer on his recommendation. The receptionist is shocked to hear this because no one from Abel's party has ever recommended anyone before, and he replies that Ryo is a very special case. The receptionist says that Ryo will still need to show proof of his strength before getting a rank up, and Abel says that he wants to talk to the guild master about that directly. The receptionist tells him and Abel to wait for a while, and soon, the dramatic guild master Hugh comes running as he hears that Abel has returned. Abel then introduces him to Ryo and says that he wants him to take the rank-up exam. Hugh replies that they will need to test his strength for that, and Abel replies that Ryo is stronger than him, which the guild master finds really hard to believe. To prove his point, Abel shows Hugh all the magic stones they collected from the wyverns, and he loses his mind. He says that the amount of magic stones they have means they have hunted enough wyverns that could destroy an entire country, and Abel tells him that he doesn't need to worry about a monster attack because they hunted the wyverns south of the Malefic Mountains. Ryo is curious if the name of the mountain is significant somehow, and Hugh says that he hasn't heard of any person who has crossed the Malefic Mountains safely. He claims that they are so dangerous that even the highest-ranking adventurers don't go there without a very compelling reason. He can't believe that Ryo and Hugh are the first people in history to achieve this feat, and he immediately agrees to increase Ryo's rank without taking a test. Just then, Abel's party barges into the room, and they are really emotional because they thought they would never see him again. The guild master decides to let them catch up with their friend while he takes Ryo outside to register. Ryo follows him, but Abel asks him to wait at the receptionist's desk after he is done because he wants to show him to a special place. After that, Hugh leads Ryo to his office while telling him that Abel's party, the Crimson Sword, is one of their strongest and most popular parties. Ryo is not really surprised by that, and he is more curious if he really deserves to be a D rank right from the start. In response, Hugh tells him that he knows how talented Abel is, but he knows that he can't defeat a wyvern on his own. That makes him believe that Ryo played an important role in fighting the wyverns, which qualifies him to be a D rank. Just then, the receptionist comes to the office with the equipment needed to formally register Ryo as an adventurer, and Hugh leaves it to her because he has too much paperwork to handle. The receptionist Nina starts by introducing herself and then begins asking the basic interview questions. She then tells Ryo that for 300 days after his registration at the guild, he can stay at the guild lodgings, but then he will have to find another place to stay. Next, she tells him about the course on dungeon exploration that the guild offers new adventurers like him, and Ryo immediately replies that he wants to enroll in the course. Nina tells him to come to the meeting hall 2 days later at 9 o'clock in the morning, and Ryo is shocked to learn that they have clocks here. Nina then moves on to the actual registration process and tells Ryo to put his hand on the crystal device in front of him. As he places his hand on the crystal, it scans his biometrics and uploads the data on the metal plate kept on top, turning it into his guild card. Nina congratulates Ryo for officially being registered at the guild, and with that, they leave the office. Soon after that, Abel takes Ryo on a tour of the town, saying that he wants to buy him some clothes and a staff as the payment for escorting him here. Ryo is glad to receive the clothes, but he is curious about the staff. Abel says that all magicians need a staff, but Ryo replies that he can use magic just fine without any tools. He adds that he also uses a sword when he has to fight melee, so a staff wouldn't really help him out much. Abel is surprised to hear this, and he is even more surprised when Ryo tells him that the small knife he has is actually his sword. Anyway, Ryo tells him that he needs something more urgently than clothes or staff, and that is information about the basics of this world. Soon after that, he learns that the hour, day, week, and month in this world are the same as that on Earth, and they even use the metric system to measure stuff. Now he is sure that someone from Earth came to this world a long time ago and changed how things are done, which is why there are so many familiar things here. Just then, Abel returns from the store after paying for the things Ryo bought, and then he tells him that the main event of the day is still left. He takes Ryo to a huge inn, where all his friends from the guild are present to celebrate his safe return. They party all night, and the next morning, Nina has to bail Ryo out to show him the place where he will be staying. She takes him to a room where 2 newbie adventurers are already staying, and the brown-haired guy introduces himself as Nils, and the blonde dude as Ito. They welcome him to their room, and once Nina leaves, Nils starts talking about how much he likes her. Ito tells him to stop dreaming of women outside his league, and then he starts making small talk with Ryo about how things are at the guild lodging. Suddenly, Nina returns to the room with another newly registered adventurer, who nervously introduces himself as Ammon, and the 4 boys soon start to bond with each other. A few days after that, Ryo and Ammon complete their crash course on dungeon exploration for dummies, and their teacher tells them that they are going to enter the first level of a dungeon in the afternoon. Ammon is visibly tense about going into a dungeon, but Ryo tells him to chill out because if he gets worked up now, he will be tired by the time they reach the dungeon. The instructor then asks if anyone has any questions, and Ryo asks him if there is a way to instantly travel to the floors they have cleared before. The instructor is impressed by the question because only experienced adventurers know about that. He says that there are some dungeons in the south that have the feature to instantly travel between checkpoints, but there is nothing like that in Loon's dungeon. After that, the instructor leads all the students to the dungeon that is in the middle of the city. He explains that the city was actually built around the dungeon, and every few years, the monster population in the dungeon suddenly increases, and sometimes the monsters reach the surface. He explains that the walls around the dungeon protect the civilians from the monsters, but then assures the newbies that there is no chance of a great monster wave right now. Soon, they reach the first floor of the dungeon, which is a safe zone without monsters. The instructor tells everyone that they are free to explore the first floor, but they need to stay close to the entrance. Ryo and Ammon team up, and soon, Ryo senses a monster approaching them. He tells Ammon to strike the monster while he holds it in place, and the boy nervously draws his sword. A few moments later, a monster ant arrives there and Ryo immediately identifies it as a soldier ant from the book he read. He tells Amen to strike the neck of the monster while he stops it using icicle lances. Ryo completely pins the monster to the ground and Amen easily cuts off its neck, scoring his first kill. He is overjoyed at this and Ryo extracts the ant's magic stone as a trophy for their first successful monster hunt. Later, they have dinner with their roommates who want to celebrate their first dungeon trip, and they are quite impressed that they managed to take down a soldier ant. Amen says that he only dealt the finishing blow and Ryo did most of the work by holding the ant down. He then says that he wants to go to the dungeon again tomorrow, but he is worried about going alone. Ryo offers to tag along because he also wants to explore the dungeon a bit more because he is concerned about finding a monster on the first floor even when the instructor said that there were no monsters there. Ito adds that he has also heard about soldier ants coming to the second and first floor lately, and the boys are confused about the reason. Just then, Abel arrives there and says it is because soldier ants can dig their way up, and the boys freak out on seeing the most famous adventurer in the town up close. Ryo, however, is frank as usual with his friend, and then Abel asks the boys to take care of him because he lacks common sense. Nils suddenly stands up in attention and introduces himself to Abel, saying that he is his idol and he wants to become a famous adventurer like him someday. He requests to shake his hand and Abel obliges, telling him to work hard but make sure that survival is his first priority. Ryo then asks Abel what he is doing here so late, and he replies that he just got back from his recent mission. Just then, his party arrives there, and the girls are mad that he came here instead of reporting to the guildmaster. He tells them that he was just guiding some beginners who needed help, but the lowly Lin tells Shaq's lost son Warren to take him away. The big guy carries Abel on his back as he screams like a baby, and then Lin starts staring at Ryo with jealous eyes. He gets a bit nervous and asks what she wants, but then the priestess Ligia tells her to snap out of it before apologizing to Ryo for the disturbance. As they go away, Ito and Nils start fanboying after them, but Ryo doesn't understand what they find impressive about that group of buffoons. Meanwhile, Rikia tells Lin that it was not nice of her to stare at Ryo, but she replies that she was just curious because Abel keeps on glazing his magic skills. Rikia admits that she is curious too, but Abel tells them they will soon see Ryo's true skills. The next day, Ryo and Amen go to the dungeon again, and this time they face some monster dogs. While Ryo holds the dogs down using icicle lances, Amen proves to be a decent swordsman as well and takes down a couple of them. As they take a break after that, Ryo remarks that Amen's sword-fighting style reminds him of Abel, and he explains that his teacher was an old dude named Kiro, who learned sword fighting from a big school in the capital. Ryo assumes that Abel must have learned from the same school, and he sees potential in Amen to become quite strong as well. Amen is impressed by his knowledge of swordplay even though he is just a mage, and Ryo tells him that he practiced with a mentor, but he developed his own sword style. He then remarks that Amen's style seems to be very exhausting, but it is also very safe, and he just needs to work on his stamina. He tells Amen that Abel used to practice his form the first thing in the morning during their travels, and that just shows that even the most talented people need to work hard. Amen feels motivated on hearing that and decides to work hard to become stronger, and Ryo is pleased by his response. The next day, Ryo visits the library and it is much bigger than his expectations. That's what she said. Anyway, he asks the librarian to show him to the alchemy section, and she shows him where books for beginners are kept. However, there are too many options that overwhelm Ryo, so he decides to take a break outside. Suddenly, the city turns dark as a total solar eclipse occurs and Ryo stares at it without eye protection like my uncle who is now blind. Just 1 second later, he realizes something is odd and all the people around him have vanished. The atmosphere itself feels different, and then suddenly, he feels an attack coming from behind. He is fast enough to react in time, blocking the powerful fire blast using a wall of ice. He wonders who the hell attacked him and then sees a badass demon mommy coming towards him, walking like she just came out of GTA 4. She is quite amused to see a human in her space and decides to have fun defeating him. Ryo realizes that he is facing a demon now, and he is quite sure that she is the strongest being he has ever seen in this world. He wants to run away from her, but he feels that he won't be able to escape this strange space no matter what he tries, so he decides to fight back. He immediately summons dozens of ice shields right before the demon mommy attacks, blocking her massive firestorm. She abruptly changes her attack, shooting an invisible wind bullet that pierces Ryo's shields, but it gets blocked by his armor. The demon can't process how a human armor can block against her attack, but as she looks closely, she finds that Ryo is wearing the Fairy King's robe. She realizes that he must be an impressive mage to have such gear and power to block her attacks, so she decides to cut him down using her sword instead of magic. Ryo also draws his ice sword and blocks her attack. He maintains a defensive position as the demon lady keeps pushing him back, but she is much faster than him, and he barely dodges a deadly strike to his face. He decides to counterattack by shooting hundreds of icicle lances at her, but the demon swiftly dodges all of them, not noticing that the solar eclipse is ending as she wastes her time playing around. Meanwhile, Ryo realizes that she is using wind magic to boost her speed, and then she jumps at him to deal the finishing blow. Ryo manages to block it without much difficulty because even though the demon is fast, her strikes are nothing compared to the headless knight who taught him. The demon, on the other hand, is impressed and asks who the hell is he to have the Fairy King's robe as well as his sword. She creates a fireball to attack him, but Ryo cancels it instantly using an icicle lance. This pisses the demon off, and she decides to kill him quickly because he can be a danger to her if the fight goes on for longer. She attacks him ruthlessly, but Ryo confidently defends against her strikes. He finds a chance to counterattack, and that makes the demon lose her balance. Ryo was waiting for this moment, and he launches a barrage of icicle lances at her. The demoness creates a wall of fire around her, neutralizing all his attacks, but as their intensity increases, she creates rock walls to protect herself. Ryo also changes his attack pattern, using the high-pressure water jets to cut through the wall and injure the demon. She is shocked when his attacks hurt him, but luckily for her, Ryo was just attacking blindly because of all the smoke. He then decides to go in for the kill, but she jumps straight towards him to block his attack. As they clash mid-air, Ryo notices the demon woman's wounds healing super fast. The moment he gets distracted by that, she sends his crashing into a building. But just as she is about to launch a powerful attack to finish him off, she notices water drops falling from the sky. She is surprised by that, but as a water drop touches her face and scalds her because it was even hotter than the boiling temperature, she screams in pain. She immediately covers herself in a rock ball while waiting for the boiling rain to end, and in the meantime, Ryo comes down. Suddenly, the demon woman unleashes powerful flame magic, blowing up everything around her. She walks towards Ryo menacingly, but by then, the eclipse is almost over and her sword disintegrates as sunlight touches it. The demoness says that they won't be able to finish their fight this time, and Ryo tells her to get lost already. She doesn't really mind him acting like a jerk and introduces herself as Leonor, asking Ryo about his name. He tells her his name too, even though he makes it clear that he doesn't want to know anything more about a demon. Leonor is surprised that Ryo knows about demons, and she thinks that she should have done all she could to kill him instead of enjoying their fight. She then tells Ryo that they will fight again in the future, but it is possible that he runs into another demon before that. She tells him not to get killed by anyone else because she will be much stronger the next time and finish him off herself. Ryo is shocked to hear that, but then the eclipse ends and everything returns to normal without a trace of the battle that just took place there. Ryo feels really odd now, and he decides to buy some books and then get some rest. He first heads to the bank to withdraw some money that he got from selling the wyvern magic stones, and then passes by his dorm room to meet his friends. He notices they are not there, but as he is about to leave the dorm, he finds them being bullied by some other adventurers. Mills and Ito call him a coward for ambushing them when they were injured, but the leader of the bullies, Dan, tells them that they can say the same thing when monsters ambush them in the dungeon and they die. Suddenly, his lackeys are knocked out cold because Ryo attacked them from behind, and he tells Dan that he was absolutely right, but he should hear his own advice sometimes. He asks him if he is ready to run now that his friends are down, and Dan immediately rushes to punch him. Ryo simply steps aside and hits him in the gut with his sword's handle, causing him to throw up this morning's breakfast. He then moves on to heal his friends, telling them that they need more stamina so that no punk-ass can catch them off guard the next time. However, before that, he says they should all recover and relax. They hit the public bath where the priest Ito heals Ryo's wound from the wind bullet. Everyone is curious about who could injure Ryo when he is so strong, and he decides not to tell them about the demon right now because relaxing comes first. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.